Good day. Today we will talk about Chapter 2, which is about C++ basics. In this chapter, we will talk about the following topics: variables and assignments, input and output, data types and expressions, simple flow of control, and program style. First, let's talk about variables and assignments. We can think of variables just like small blackbirds. We use them to temporarily store information. In this case, we are referring to information or data that are used by our program. We can write a number on them. We can also change the number as well as erase the number. In C++, variables are names for memory locations. What we can do with them is that we can write a value in them. We can change the value stored there. However, we cannot erase the memory location in which we store those values. For example, let's take a look at this program. This program makes use of variables. For example, we have the following variables. As you can see here, this variable is declared with the data type int or integer, while these two were declared with the data type double. As we can see here, we have the following output and input routines. In this case, the first cin statement will ask for an input from the user. Whatever value is entered by the user through the keyboard will be stored in this variable. Once it is already stored or assigned into this variable, that value can now be used by our program in its entire execution. Same applies with the second cin statement, in which we also input data through the keyboard and assign that to the variable onewait. Next, we have the following assignment statement. As you can see here, we are performing a multiplication operation, and whatever is the result of that operation will be assigned to another variable, which is in this case the total weight variable. And of course, this part, we are simply displaying the contents of our variables. And finally, we also would like to display the result of our assignment statement, in which the content of this multiplication operation is stored in this variable, the total weight variable. For example, let's run this program. Let's say we would like to enter 11, and for the weight, 3. So that's the result of our program. Let's try another set of input. Okay. So that's a very simple program which demonstrates to us how to use variables, specifically how to declare variables and how to assign values to those variables. Let's now talk about identifiers. As we've mentioned a while ago, identifiers actually refer to variable names. A while ago, we've also seen that we were able to declare variables with different data types. But of course, aside from choosing the right data types, we also have to name our variables the correct way. So how do we choose variable names? In choosing variable names, we must use meaningful names that represent data to be stored. When naming variables, there are certain rules that we also need to follow. For instance, the first character of our variable name must be a letter, or it can also be the underscore character. Although the most common practice is that we start our variable names with letters. Also, the remaining characters must be letters, numbers, or underscore character if our variable name happened to be two words or more. In C++, we also have what we call keywords. Sometimes they can also be referred to as reserved words. So what are these reserved words? In C++, reserved words are those that are used specifically by the C++ language. Therefore, it must be used as they are defined in the programming language. Hence, we can't use them as identifiers. And talking about variables, we can't use variables that are not declared. Otherwise, it will generate a syntax error. Talking about declaring variables, we must first declare variables before they can be used in our program. What it does is it tells the computer the type of data to store. If you will remember, whenever we declare variables, we are actually reserving memory space for us to store data that are used by our program. For example, we would like to declare the following variables. As we have seen a while ago from our example, the following variables have their respective data types. Also, if we are going to follow the rules that we mentioned about how we name our variables, as you can see here, they all start with a letter. And in case where your variable name has more than one word, in this case 3 words, then we can simply use the underscore. However, we can't use space when naming our variable, otherwise that would cause a syntax error. We actually have two data types that we used in this sample declaration. The first is int, which is actually an abbreviation for integer. The following is the minimum and maximum value that it can store. For instance, we have positive whole numbers or even negative whole numbers. On the other hand, we also have the double data type, which represents number with a fractional component. For instance, we have the following. There are also different ways to declare variables in terms of their location. For instance, we can declare a variable prior to use. For example, in this program, we are going to use the variable somewhere in the middle. Hence, right before we use our variable, we declare it before its actual use, just like this one. Or we can also use it this way, at the beginning. For instance, we have the main function of our program, and before everything else, we declare all our variables. Either way, both should work. It's just a matter of preference, if which one would appeal to you the most. But in my case, I would prefer declaring my variable at the beginning of my function. Let's now talk about declaration of variables. When declaring variables, we follow the following syntax. Of course, this is the basic syntax of how we declare variables in C++. First, we must specify the type name or the data type of the variable that we would like to declare. Then, followed by the variable names. Of course, if we are going to declare variables that have the same data type, we can simply declare them on a single line, then separate them with comma, just like this one. Talking about assignment statements, they are used to change the value of a variable. Here's the example that we saw from a previous program. In this case, total weight is assigned the value of 1 weight plus number of bars. Whenever we use assignment statements, they should end with a semicolon. The single variable to be changed is always on the left of the assignment operator, just like this one. We have the following examples. When we are writing assignment statements, we can assign to our variable either a direct value, or we can also assign another variable, or we can also assign an expression such as this one. Talking about basic operations in C++, we must take note of the following. In C++, this operator have a different meaning. In this case, this operator is not an equal sign. In C++, this is the assignment operator. In C++, it means that the new value of this operation is being assigned to this variable. Also, whenever we declare variables, we also need to initialize them. Thus, we have the process of initializing variables. We must take note that whenever we declare a variable, it does not have a value. Thus, in order to give it its first value, we need to initialize the variable. To initialize variables, we use assignment statements. For instance, we declare the following variable, and we would like to give it an initial value of 26.3. In this case, this is the statement where we initialize the variable. Aside from that, declaration and initialization can also be combined using the following method. For the first topic, we have the following exercises that you can try for yourself. In this section, it is expected that you now know how to declare variables and to use the data types that is appropriate for the data that will be stored. We can also declare and initialize two variables and also give variable names for the following identifiers. Remember the rules on how we name your variables. It must start with a letter, and you can also use underscore for variable names that has more than one words.